The roar of the crowd was deafening, an electric storm of voices surging through the packed arena. Camera flashes lit up the sea of faces, fans on their feet, chanting, screaming, anticipating something they had never seen before. Tonight wasn't just any fight. It wasn't a scripted spectacle or a routine championship bout. It was a collision of two worlds, brute force against high-flying finesse, an unstoppable force meeting an untouchable legend. In one corner stood a man known for his dominance in the octagon, an undefeated warrior whose name sent shivers down the spines of opponents before they even stepped into the cage. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the relentless grappler, the undefeated champion, a man who had humbled giants and broken spirits with his suffocating pressure. Across from him, standing defiant in the glow of the arena lights, was a different kind of legend. Rey Mysterio, the master of flight, a man who had defied physics for decades, flipping through the air with a grace that made even the most hardened fighters question reality. Their paths were never meant to cross, yet here they were, two icons, one ring, and a question that no one thought they'd ever need answered. What happens when the greatest ground fighter in history faces the greatest aerial artist of all time? The energy in the building was unreal, a strange mix of excitement and disbelief. Some fans still couldn't wrap their heads around it. Khabib, a man who had made his name mauling opponents in an enclosed cage, had never set foot in a wrestling ring before. He didn't perform, he demolished. He didn't play to the crowd, he silenced them. And yet, here he was, standing tall, his expression unreadable, his eyes locked on the masked warrior across from him. On the other side, Rey Mysterio bounced lightly on his feet, his movements almost effortless, like he was weightless. He had faced giants before, men twice his size, men who could crush him with a single move. But this was different. This wasn't just about size or strength. Khabib wasn't a slow-moving powerhouse. He was fast, calculating, and worst of all, once he got his hands on you, escape was nearly impossible. The referee signaled for the match to begin, and the atmosphere in the building shifted. Every single person watching knew this wasn't a normal fight. This wasn't MMA. This wasn't traditional wrestling. This was something entirely new. Khabib took a measured step forward, his hands low, his stance deceptively calm. Rey Mysterio, ever the showman, took a quick step back, eyeing the distance between them. He had spent his life evading bigger, stronger opponents, using speed and agility to stay one step ahead. But Khabib wasn't a wrestler trained to react to rehearsed sequences. He was a hunter, a predator who only needed one opening to change the entire fight. The tension was unbearable, fans gripping their seats, waiting for that first move that would define the night. And then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. Rey exploded forward, a blur of motion as he leaped, twisting through the air in a way that defied logic. The crowd erupted, gasping as he spun toward Khabib, aiming for an early strike. But just as fast as Rey moved, Khabib reacted. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. In a fraction of a second, his arm shot out, intercepting the masked luchador midair. The impact was thunderous, like a car crash, as Khabib caught him, using Rey's own momentum to drive him hard into the mat. The ring shook, the sound echoing through the arena, and for the first time, the excitement shifted into something else: shock. Rey lay motionless for a brief moment, his body stunned from the sudden impact. Khabib didn't celebrate, didn't taunt. He simply adjusted his stance, watching, waiting. The crowd was split. Half of them couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The other half was already chanting, urging Rey to get back up. And slowly, he did. Shaking off the pain, he rolled to his feet, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. He had felt power before, but this was something else. Khabib was different. He didn't just counter. He absorbed, controlled, and punished mistakes without mercy. Rey had thrown himself into the air, and Khabib had turned it into a devastating slam without a second thought. If Rey was going to survive this, he had to change the game. He couldn't let Khabib dictate the pace. He had to be faster, more unpredictable, and most importantly, he had to keep moving. And then, just as quickly as the fight had paused, it resumed. Rey feinted left, forcing Khabib to react, then spun right, using his speed to slip behind him. The crowd erupted again as Rey jumped onto the ropes, using them like a springboard, launching himself backward toward Khabib. This time, the impact connected Rey's boots struck Khabib's chest, forcing the undefeated fighter to take a step back. It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the armor. Rey knew he couldn't overpower Khabib, but if he could keep him off balance, keep him second-guessing, he had a chance. The fight was far from over, but one thing was clear. This was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. Two legends, two styles, one unforgettable night. And as Rey landed on his feet, staring down the undefeated warrior, who now knew he wasn't going down without a fight, one question hung in the air. Could he actually do it? Could Rey Mysterio find a way to defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov? Or was he simply delaying the inevitable? The answer was coming, but no one knew what it would be. Not yet. Rey Mysterio steadied himself, his body still reeling from the earlier impact, but his mind racing faster than ever. Khabib was watching him closely now, no longer seeing this as a simple contest of strength and skill. He had expected a spectacle, maybe even a challenge, but he hadn't expected this, the masked legend refusing to be broken, refusing to accept the inevitable. Rey wiped his gloved hands against his tights, adjusting his footing. He couldn't afford another mistake. One wrong move, one slip up, and Khabib would capitalize, locking him into something he wouldn't escape from. He had fought giants before, but none like this. Khabib wasn't a brawler throwing wild punches or a slow-moving brute. He was precise, methodical, and worst of all, he was patient. But Rey wasn't just fast, he was unpredictable. He took a deep breath, then shot forward again, this time weaving like a blur, feinting left, then right, then back. Khabib's eyes tracked him, but he didn't lunge. He knew better than to chase what he couldn't catch. Rey took to the ropes again, this time launching himself into a twisting backflip, his boots aimed for Khabib's head. The crowd gasped, expecting impact. But Khabib was already moving. He sidestepped at the last second, reading Rey's momentum, and before Rey's feet even touched the mat, Khabib grabbed him mid-air, twisting his body like a rag doll and slamming him spine first onto the canvas. The sound was brutal. The ring shook, and for a moment, the entire arena went silent. Rey curled up in pain, his back arching as he clutched his ribs. He had felt power before, but this was something else entirely. Khabib had made it look effortless, turning Rey's own momentum into a weapon against him. But even as the pain radiated through his body, he forced himself to move. Staying down wasn't an option. Not against someone like this. He rolled to the side, grabbing the bottom rope and pulling himself up, breathing heavily. Khabib remained still, watching. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't taunting. He was calculating. Waiting for Rey to make another move, another mistake. And then, something changed. Rey had seen this before, fighters getting too comfortable, too sure of their advantage. He couldn't overpower Khabib, but he could outthink him. So he did something unexpected. He staggered back a step, feigning exhaustion, letting his arms hang loose. The crowd reacted instantly, their voices rising in concern, but Rey knew exactly what he was doing. Khabib, ever the opportunist, took the bait. He closed the distance with lightning speed, reaching for Rey's legs to set up another devastating slam. But just as Khabib went low, Rey sprang to life, flipping over him with impossible agility. Khabib's hands hit nothing but air. Before Khabib could turn, Rey was already airborne again, bouncing off the ropes and twisting his body mid-flight. He spun through the air, flipping over Khabib's head and latching onto his shoulders in a split second. And then Rey Mysterio's signature move. He swung downward, using his entire body weight to flip Khabib forward, sending the undefeated champion crashing face first into the mat. The 619 had landed. The crowd erupted in pure shock. No one had ever seen Khabib thrown off balance like that, let alone taken down with such speed. Rey hit the canvas and scrambled to his feet, his adrenaline surging. He had done the impossible. He had taken Khabib off his feet. But he couldn't celebrate. Not yet. Because Khabib was already moving. The undefeated warrior pushed himself up, shaking his head, wiping his face as if clearing the momentary daze. His expression remained unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes now. He wasn't just assessing Rey anymore, he was respecting him. This wasn't a circus act. This wasn't an exhibition. Rey had earned his attention, and now Khabib was done playing it safe. Rey knew he had to strike again before Khabib could adjust. He sprinted forward, leaping into the air, twisting his body for another high-impact maneuver. But this time, Khabib was ready. He ducked low, catching Rey midair in a brutal counter. In a blink, Khabib wrapped his arms around Rey's waist and launched him backward in a lightning-fast suplex, slamming him down with bone-crushing force. The entire ring shook. Rey's body arched from the impact, his breath leaving him in a sharp gasp. The referee moved closer, checking on him, but Khabib wasn't stopping. He knew how to finish a fight, and he was about to do it. He rolled Rey over, grabbing his arm, twisting his legs around Rey's shoulders. The crowd gasped as they realized what was happening. The same submission hold that had ended so many fights before the armbar. If Khabib locked it in, there was no escape. Rey struggled, twisting, fighting against it with everything he had. He knew if Khabib extended the hold, it was over. But just as Khabib wrenched back, Rey did something no one expected. Instead of trying to break free with strength, he used momentum. He twisted his own body, rolling forward, flipping Khabib onto his back in an improvised counter. The move stunned everyone, even Khabib. It wasn't power that saved Rey. It was pure, instinctive agility. Khabib released the hold, momentarily surprised, and Rey took his chance. He stumbled to his feet, pain still radiating through his back, but his mind sharper than ever. He had to move, had to keep Khabib guessing. He sprinted toward the ropes again, leaping, flipping, using every ounce of energy left in his body. The fans were on their feet, screaming, caught between disbelief and awe. Rey launched into the air one more time, soaring toward Khabib, ready to hit the biggest move of his career. But then Khabib moved. In a split second, the undefeated fighter adjusted his stance, sidestepped just enough, and caught Rey out of midair. His arms wrapped around Rey's waist, his grip like steel. And in one fluid motion, Khabib lifted him high into the air, higher than anyone thought possible, and brought him crashing down with a thunderous slam. The arena went silent. The impact was brutal, decisive. Rey lay motionless for a second, the wind knocked out of him, his body completely still. Khabib exhaled, standing over him, his expression calm but focused. The referee hesitated, unsure whether Rey could continue. But then, just as the official moved in, Rey's fingers twitched. A slow, deliberate movement. He wasn't done. Not yet. Yet. The crowd exploded once more, their voices shaking the very foundation of the arena. Khabib stepped back, watching as Rey, against all odds, started pushing himself up again. His movements were sluggish, his body battered, but his spirit was unbreakable. Khabib's expression shifted slightly, just a flicker of something almost like respect. He had seen fighters refuse to quit before, but this was something else. The match wasn't over. Not yet. Yet. And no one, not even Khabib, knew how it was going to end. Rey Mysterio dragged himself to his feet, each breath sharp and heavy, his ribs aching with every movement. He had taken punishment before, fought men who towered over him, but this was different. Khabib wasn't just powerful, he was relentless, calculated, precise. Every move he made had weight behind it, every counter designed to break his opponent's will. But Rey wasn't broken. Not yet. Across the ring, Khabib adjusted his stance, his expression unreadable. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no frustration, only focus. He had seen this before. Fighters who refused to stay down, who pushed past their limits. But in his world, heart wasn't enough. Skill, strength, and strategy decided everything. He had respected Rey's resilience, but he wasn't here to be entertained. He was here to finish the fight. The crowd was at a fever pitch, voices clashing in a mixture of awe and desperation. They had expected a spectacle, but what they got was something far more real. A battle of wills, two icons from opposite worlds testing the limits of their bodies and minds. But time was running out. One way or another, this had to end. Khabib took a slow step forward, raising his hands, ready to lock Rey into a position where escape was impossible. But Rey, battered as he was, still had fight left in him. He darted forward, faster than anyone expected, using every ounce of energy to keep Khabib guessing. He ducked low, feinted left, then leapt onto the ropes, launching himself high into the air. The crowd held their breath. Khabib reacted instantly, positioning himself for another counter, but Rey was ready. He twisted mid-flight, contorting his body in a way that seemed impossible. Khabib reached out, but Rey slipped through his grip, flipping over him, using his momentum to swing back and BAM. His boots connected perfectly with the side of Khabib's head. A perfectly timed enziguri. For the first time in the match, Khabib stumbled. His feet shuffled, his balance wavered, and for just a second, he was vulnerable. The arena erupted. Rey didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the ropes again, rebounding with everything he had left, flipping forward into a second kick, striking Khabib square in the jaw. The undefeated warrior staggered back. He wasn't down, but he was on the edge. Rey saw his opening. This was it. He leaped onto the second rope, hands gripping the top as he swung his entire body through the air. The 619 was coming. He spun his legs extended, aiming to hit the one move that had taken down giants before. But Khabib saw it. In an instant, he dropped low, dodging Rey's legs with a fighter's reflexes. Before Rey could react, Khabib lunged forward, catching him mid-motion. The shift was so fast that the audience barely had time to process it. 1 second, Rey was in control. The next, Khabib had him trapped. And then it happened. Khabib spun, hoisting Rey into the air, locking his arms around his waist. The entire arena gasped as he lifted Rey up and then SLAM. A crushing powerbomb, so sudden and brutal that the ring shook beneath them. Rey's body bounced from the impact before settling motionless on the mat. The noise from the crowd shifted from exhilaration to stunned silence. Khabib exhaled, his muscles tense, his mind locked in fighter's mode. But as he looked down at Rey, something shifted in his stance. He had won countless fights, dominated opponents who were considered the best in the world. But this was different. This wasn't a cage, and this wasn't just another fight. This was a man, smaller than him, outmatched in strength, who had fought with everything he had and refused to quit. The referee moved in to check on Rey, but before any decision could be made, something unexpected happened. Khabib took a step back. Then, in a gesture that no one could have predicted, he extended his hand. The undefeated fighter, known for his ruthless efficiency, offering his opponent a show of respect. The crowd erupted. Rey, dazed and exhausted, slowly opened his eyes. He could barely move, his body screaming in protest, but he saw the gesture. A flicker of understanding passed between them. He had lost, but he had never backed down. And in that moment, Khabib acknowledged that. With effort, Rey reached out, gripping Khabib's hand. The arena exploded with cheers, louder than they had been the entire night. This wasn't just about winning or losing anymore. This was about two legends standing on the same ground, sharing the same respect. Khabib helped Rey to his feet, giving him a nod before stepping back, allowing him his moment with the crowd. Rey, despite the pain, raised his arm, signaling to the fans that he was still standing, still fighting. And just like that, the story was complete. Two warriors, two different worlds, and one unforgettable night. Khabib had proven his dominance, but Rey had shown that resilience, heart, and courage could shake even the strongest. No scripts, no theatrics, just raw, undeniable respect. As Khabib left the ring, Rey stood tall, exhausted but victorious in his own way. The match was over, but the legend of what had happened that night would live on forever. And in the end, that was the true victory.